Hey Sarah,
Hi, Carleigh.
how are you?
I'm good. Been a very full day. So, one thing, who is Carleigh J. Haywood of Badger and Chirp?
Oh, who am I?
Yeah, who are you?
I am a book artist and I teach business classes online. And I've done our bookbinding business has been a 10-year journey. And we sold on Etsy mainly. And then we also sold to um, a little bit locally, but people in Utah don't buy handmade stuff.
I
They,
noticed the exact same thing when I lived in Utah. People in Utah don't buy, they make.
yes, they do.
They make,
We are very resourceful
yeah.
and we make things. Yeah, so I'm an artist, but I really approach my art more as a teaching
Hmm.
medium. And so it's not one of those, I need to get my name out there and I need to sell my artwork kind of thing. I really use it as a teaching tool.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I portray go about my art. Whereas my books, it was definitely a business mindset that I had with that, even though it was super fun to make them. And really, I got to be super creative with all the different books that I made. So,
Yeah. The funny thing is that we both grew up in Utah and never knew each other until I was living in New York City and you were in Utah. We met online. Now I live in Seattle, and we collaborate this way online pretty frequently, though nobody knew that until
yeah,
now, I think.
I kind of really love Pinterest because I got to meet you.
Honestly, I think that Pinterest is that's my favorite thing about Pinterest is that it connected us and also connected us with Amy Spencer as well. I think that's how I met Amy Spencer. She's Aestus Book Arts or Aestus Book Arts on
Yeah.
Instagram. But it connected a lot of us in the early days of Pinterest, and we've been able to keep those connections as we moved over to Instagram because Pinterest started doing crazy weird things that
Yeah,
made
we
it.
couldn't connect. We can't really connect on Pinterest anymore.
You can't connect on Pinterest anymore, so we were able to migrate successfully over to Instagram. Um, anyway, so I've got this art project that started out as doodles in my notebook while I was at meetings at work. At first, I just wanted a really good, solid illustration of a weaver's knot because I'm always forgetting how to tie that, and it's a really important bookbinding knot. So I just wanted a really good illustration of it. But then I started drawing other knots. Like I used to teach rock climbing for the Boy Scouts, and I started drawing knots I used in rock climbing, and I started doing like taut line hitches and other kinds of knots and constrictor knots and tension knots, things that I used when I went spelunking. And as I'm drawing all these knots, I'm thinking about what the description of these knots are, like what these knots do and how that's a lot like people. So like a weaver's knot joins two ends, and a constrictor knot tightens things down, gathers them together, but it gets tighter and tighter and tighter. It doesn't loosen. And then, like a taut line hitch, it anchors things, and a butterfly knot pulls three ways. And, a bowline hitches things, or not hitches, hoists things up. And yeah, so I was just thinking about how what knots do is like what people do. So then it evolved into these, right? I'm carving and printing in progress, 9 knots in progress. And then that wasn't enough yet, because I started seeing these knots as bigger. Like, so it just started out as like 12 by 18 prints of knots. And I wanted to call it like Guidebook to Knots for Humans or something like that. I still haven't decided on the title. But as I'm carving these knots, I'm starting to see the people that these knots describe. And like, what do those people look like? And it's almost like a series of self-portraits that I'm seeing. Like, what do I feel like in that knot situation? Or what makes me feel like I'm in that knot situation. And so then I started seeing big, like
Okay,
life.
what do you mean big? Because these are like 12 by 18 pieces. And you were thinking of making a book out of all of them?
Yes.
So these would be like the pages in the book.
Yeah, the big ones are individual prints, and I plan on converting them into polymer plates so I can actually print like a one sheet wonder kind of book.
Oh, okay.
So just print them all onto a little book that is actually pocket size, so it could be the pocket guide to knots for humans. But it's just a polymer shrinkage of the lino cuts that I'm doing. So big prints, 12 by 18, convert it digitally to smaller polymer plates so that I can print it onto a small book. But I also am seeing people tying knots, or people holding knots, or people pulling on rope in this. And I don't think I can. So here I've got this sheet of plywood that is 6 feet tall. It's taller than I am. And I want to carve these people out of these big sheets of plywood and print them onto like bed sheets or something using a steamroller. Because I want these to be big. I want the people in them to be life size. And that's actually where these hands come in. Because I started seeing these people, and then I was like, how are these knots going to work? How are they going to connect? So I started envisioning these knots coming out of the two-dimensional prints, like three-dimensional knots coming out of two-dimensional prints. And I was trying to figure out how that would work. So I just thought I'd put these onto the prints. I don't know. But this is really fun and also kind of hard.
Yeah.
Actually really, really hard, because when I pull my hands out of the silicone to do this, there is so much suction keeping my hand in there that I have to I can wiggle my hand like this, and I have to get like an air bubble into it before I can start to pull my hand out. It was very tricky. And I also have to like collapse my hand when it gets to the wrist part so that I don't tear the silicone. So that's fun. And now I'm seeing like just like in a whole room with like 9 bed sheet size prints and these hands attached somehow to the prints, but like acting as the hands of the person in the print. So like the person in the print is doing what these hands are doing, except now the hands are coming out of the print.
Okay, I see that.
Yeah. And the hands are holding the knot, just like I posted on Instagram before.
Okay. I think that's really doable. When you first started talking about it, I was thinking with paper, and I could not figure out how you're going to attach the solid flat paper to the hands coming out. But when you said fabric or sheets, that allows for flowing. It allows for different formational shapes. You can shape it differently. So you can place the hands, and it doesn't have to be completely flat. It can be, flowing and into it. It's super,
That flowing is something that I've been thinking about, because the piece that I'm struggling with now is how do these all relate together? Because it's a book. It might be a giant book made out of bed sheets, but it is still a book. And I wanted to figure out, how can these images relate together to tell a story that is meaningful and will be that you can get from the pieces without like added words to it. I don't think I necessarily want to use words, although I will use words. I have been using words for the knots themselves, but some way to make them fit together into a story-like way.
See, that's kind of, unless because visual storytelling, you take somebody from one thing to the next, and then there's an end at some point. And there might be your climax or whatever, ups and downs, but you actually there's a starting point, and here's where you end. Whereas if you just have knots and hands, how are you going to go from one to the next visually, and then to the next, and then to the next, without words. And if you can't figure that out, then you need to bring in words, I think.
Bring in words. I mean, I can do words. In fact, it might be kind of cool to, like, behind the people have words carved in the blocks. It's like that there's text that looks like it's going behind them or around them. That's interesting. But also, you said something that sparked a little thing for me. I don't know where it's going just yet, but you said that it has an end. And I just thought, well, what if there isn't an end? What if it's cyclical? Because, you know, these knots, they don't really end. You might get a knot with another person or a knotty situation with another person. But, I mean, the only end for this is death. So that's, I guess, one way we could go. But have you ever, oh gosh, back in like 7th grade, I think, I did this research project on theater, the history of theater, and I made this sort of scrolly stage thing. So like the scenes rotated like this. What if I did that, but like on a giant scale, because I've got 24-foot ceilings and these bed sheets are connected to each other. I think there might have to be two
like
versions.
A big towel roll.
Yeah, exactly. Like a big towel roll that goes all the way up to the ceiling and made out of bed sheets and that have people with knots in their hands. Oh my goodness. So I'm going to be carving blocks, and they're going to be made out of plywood. What if I have two versions of all of these people, and I attach the hands, my 3-dimensional hands, to the plywood block after I'm done printing? And I have all these bed sheets that I attach this way, and somehow the images, all of these images of knots, connect to each other. So it looks like they're interacting vertically with each other. And maybe there's even a rope that goes all the way around the towel.
Yeah.
The towel thing. I wonder, let's see, if they're 8 feet each. I want 9. What's 8 times 9? 72. 72. That's 72 feet. So, I mean, I sort of need like 36 feet, but I could do it like diagonally and get 36 feet. Or I could do it out in the hall. The ceiling's even higher out in the hall.
You could overlap them, right?
Yeah, no, it's true.
Because like on the sheet, you could actually kind of like, here's the next one. So they're actually not even up above each other like this, but they're maybe covering.
Oh, like a brick sort of thing? Oh my goodness. That could be so cool if they were like brick laid like that, like the half lap pattern.
Something
so they're
like
too
that.
wide and then going like that. I think I would need an even number if I were to do that. So 8 or 10 and not 9. 4 times 8 is 32. Half of that is 16. So maybe 8 would be better because, well, I think I could probably manage 10 too. We'll lose some length in the sewing. Okay. All right. So what remains to be seen is, what do these images actually look like?
So you were talking about text, like there could be text in them. If they were made with text, can you show me or explain to me visually what the people look like in your mind when you were thinking of them?
Will you repeat what you just said? Because we had a situation.
Yes. So I just want to know what your visual of the people really is. Like when you see them in your mind, what do they look like?
I definitely see high contrast. So like this, where the shadows are also pretty dark, but the other proof I have actually has some white spots because I did some more carving. But very dramatic contrast in the images. And I don't know, what I'm feeling and not necessarily seeing is love and struggle and conflict. When I think about the butterfly knot and how its purpose is so that you can load it in 3 directions, I think about myself being the knot loaded in 3 directions by my children, because I have 3 children and I very, very frequently feel like I'm being pulled in different directions. So I guess I saw myself in that knot. And I also I saw relationships I've had with other people in other knots. And then I guess the weaver's knot is kind of a hopeful knot where you're hoping to connect 2 ends. Anyway, so I guess I'm not seeing very much. I'm feeling a lot, but not seeing much, which makes it tricky to draw.
So you talked about your kids and how some of these knots represent them to you and your connection with them. Mm-hmm. Are some of these images their size? Are they child size?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And maybe it's even just the one knot that is a book. I mean, it was already going to be a book, but a butterfly knot connecting 4 people, or like me in the middle of this knot with the 3 gremlins pulling at me. Or maybe not take it so literally, but yeah, they can definitely be in there. It's not something I explored. Yeah.
Okay. The other thing that I thought of when you were talking was you mentioned that maybe it's cyclical. There's no end to it, mm-hmm. But there is ends because you have the weaver's knot in there. You're connecting 2 ends.
Yeah.
Or start, finish. That's where it kind of they all connect and end.
Yeah, well, and I also wanted to do a grapevine knot, it's basically the knot you use for a friendship bracelet. So you can adjust the length of this thing. And I thought that was a really good describer, too, that this knot is used to adjust and adapt. Yeah.
Okay, so here's an idea. I have a piece that represents basically my testimony, things that I believed in or I believe in. Mm-hmm. And what I did in order to actually figure out where my images went, each page only had 1 image. It had a symbol on it. It could have been a dove or a star or some kind of symbol. And I had to figure out what order they went in, kind of how to tell that story. And basically all the viewer got was the title, which was my testimony. They got no explanation of everything because I just couldn't go into that depth to explaining what everything meant to me.
Right.
It's just really huge. So I simplified everything into a symbol, and this is what it represents. And the way I chose to go about deciding which order they went in was when I actually started believing in them, kind of the timeline of my life, and how they affected me and changed me. So it could be that these knots that you have they obviously represent something to you. There's some meaning to them. Maybe you could take them and put them in a timeline in that sense, that they represent moments where things have changed, or these knots were tied in your life, in your story. I'm thinking of like the witches with the string, right? And all the knots put into it.
That kind of is exactly what this is. Where does it get cut?
Yes.
Okay. So I guess what you're saying is figure out exactly what each of these knots mean to me and what point in my life I felt that knot.
Or when it entered into your life, because like you have your children, and at what point did you actually feel like now you've got all of them together and they're, compared to a friendship and that tying together knot? Those two things mean something different. And they come in at different points in your life.
I think I want to have the weaver's knot at both ends. Because I'm thinking about, when I first started my family, that was joining two ends. Many things have happened in the interim. But my oldest is turning 11 next month. And she's becoming my best friend. I am a grown woman whose best friend is an 11-year-old. But she's phenomenal. Like, I don't know how she got to be as cool as she is. It was not my doing. But I feel like I'm doing that again, connecting two ends again with this child of mine. Yeah. Okay.
So could it possibly be you are one of those and she's the other that have the weaver's knots, the beginning and the end?
I think that the weaver's knot is not one person, but two. Yeah. Interesting. I wonder if there's some kind of abstract way to make the people or the images look like the knots. Like not like literally, but maybe something with their posture and like the words around them or like the setting around them that looks sort of like the knot that they represent.
You have a knot with you?
Yeah.
Let's just take a look at the knot and see if we can visually see something right away from it.
So this is a figure eight knot. In this form, it's used as a stopper to like keep a rope from sliding. It's also used in other forms, like a figure eight on a bite, or a figure is meant to like be an anchor at the top of a cliff to hold you if you're not rock climbing, but rappelling. And then a figure eight follow through is good for connecting to things where you need a loop around it, but you wouldn't actually be able to take a loop and put it around it. So you tie this knot, go around like a post or something, and then you go back down through the knot to create the follow through. But in this form, it's a stopper.
So if you have,
Like if arms are doing something.
yeah, I'm trying to visually see it. I mean, when I see the big sheets and the people on them and the rope that kind of connects, and it's a continual rope that goes along to each person. Yeah. What are they doing with that rope? Are they tying the knot?
Gosh. So, I mean, with this pair of hands and this knot, yes. But I also, gosh, there are so many complicated pieces here. I also saw hands like dropping a knot like it's hot. It's like hands where they're like, I can't hold this knot. Maybe that's not possible.
Oh, it's art. Everything's possible.
Yeah. Well, or it might, deserve editing, because even good ideas don't always make the cut. Or usually they just go back into my drawer of millions of ideas and get pulled out at a later date. Okay. So we've got them interacting in some way, perhaps parallel, and maybe there's a rope going all the way through these knots connecting them. Cyclical. I know that having the weavers not be the beginning and the end in this cyclical sort of story is important. I'm not sure that the rope, like the physical rope going through it, is important.
Okay, so how are these people interacting with the knots? Are they tying the knots? Are they holding the knots? I mean, you said you imagined one throwing them. Is this a short rope that they have that they're using? What does that look like visually with them?
Maybe it's not vertically cyclical, but horizontally cyclical, because it could be one long rope where you've got someone who's tying a knot, someone who's pulling on the knot, someone who's dropping a knot. So there's knots, lots of knots on this one rope. And so there could be tension, like someone's pulling over here and that person's like trying to tie a knot. So there's tension on the rope there, but from here to there, there's no tension, and that person is maybe tying a knot or maybe just holding one. And then beyond that, there's somebody dropping the rope and just letting go.
That tells a story, Sarah.
Yeah, it does. Gosh, I really liked this idea of the towel rack. But I think that horizontally is the way to go. And I'll have to make sure that the rope lines up with the images as I carve them in the big sheets of plywood so that I can put them together. Yeah, that tells a story.
Okay, we got one more part though. You said
What?
you had two, so that would be the images. Then you have
Right.
these hands that you wanted to do.
Mm-hmm. The hands holding the knots. So how does this work together? We've got hands holding knots, and they are like mounted in a box or something onto the face of the plywood that I used to print the bed sheets. So they're going to be mirror images. Oh, I don't know that that'll work. I'm not sure that they can be the same. Maybe the hands are by themselves and not mounted on the front of the plywood. So they're like in wooden boxes. Maybe they could be between the bed sheets, mounted on the wall. No?
No, I think you should keep the bed sheets all together. I think they need to be one continuous piece.
Oh yeah, no. They definitely need to. Yes, they definitely need to be one continuous piece. They can't be interrupted. But these hands could go. I don't know if I use the hallway outside. They could be like opposite each other in the hallway. Or I might be able to manage doing it opposite each other in the gallery. Okay. I mean, do they need to be closely connected to the bed sheets or just parallel to them somehow?
It could just be another topic. I mean, really, if you just use the same subject matter, but you're telling different stories with them, you could do that too.
Well, and honestly, I feel like this is 4 different books. We have the bed sheets, we have the hands tying knots, we have the prints of the knots, and then we've got the bed sheet prints and the knot prints shrunk down into a little pocketbook, a pocket guide. And the big knots, they can be, I don't know, they could be bound if I wanted to, but I don't necessarily feel like they need to be. But then everything is put together into a small book. Yeah, I feel like that small book is going to be the connection between all of them. Because I'm taking the knot prints, I'm taking the bed sheets. The hands are pretty obviously connected to both the bed sheets and the knot prints. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, they don't necessarily have to be like that. Okay. So, recap. Bed sheets. Story progresses horizontally. Everybody's holding a rope, interacting with it in a different way. And then my hands are just going to be simple. They're not going to be mounted to the plywood sheets or anything. They're just going to be hands in a box, holding or tying a knot. And then I've got my very simple prints of the knots that are being depicted. And I think it's important that the knots are being depicted in this way with the description of the knot, like what they do, because that's what started the whole thing. Like the purpose of a knot is why I started thinking about people.
And that will be in your little the book.
Yeah, it'll be in the little book, the pocket guide. What I was thinking for this pocket guide was that I'd have a book where I've got a knot and then it opens up and shows the person that is like that knot, or people that are like that knot. So it'd be like a fold-out panel kind of thing.
Do you have words on that?
Yes.
Describe.
The people, so like the one that represents the weaver's knot is just going to be called weaver's knot. But the knot is not going to be called weaver's knot. It's going to be called joining two ends. So there will be text. The knots and the people will be labeled with basically their names, their titles.
Okay. Will the hands themselves interact with each other, or will they all be individual pieces?
That's something that I thought about too, because I can make this lots longer and have it connect pairs of hands if I wanted to. In fact, it can connect. They don't have to be separate. Let's see. How would it be different if they were connected versus separate?
Well, I think you have the bed sheets and those are connected.
Yeah.
So to see them individually as individuals, that's a little bit different too. So that's another approach.
I think that while I could connect them, I would leave them as individuals.
Wait, back up. Say that again.
I said that even though I could connect the hands, I would leave them separate as individuals, like not have the rope connect them between them, because of how it's telling the story slightly differently.
Okay.
Yeah. What do you think?
I think that I would leave them separate as individual pieces.
Yeah. Okay. Good. We agree.
Good.
Well, this was really, really valuable and helpful. Thank you so much, Karleigh, for helping me talk through this. Somebody gosh, I forget her name, but when I posted the picture on Instagram of my hands holding the knot, she said, how do you nurture your ideas to become art rather than, like, I guess, a superficial interpretation of a theme? And I said, good question. I'll ask Karleigh. No, so I think that this right here, our interaction, will be valuable in helping open up that process. But you also have your videos that you're working on of the elements of an artist book, right? And I think that that will also help her a lot to figure out how she herself can nurture this art inside of her.
Yeah, I think one of the key things is really connecting it to a meaning and connecting it to concept. Mm-hmm. Your concept or your theme is knots, but it's not really. It's all about people.
Yeah.
It's about the different types of people. These knots represent people. There's a relationship pattern there for you. So if you get past the typical visual theme of what it really is when you see it, just on first impression of its knots, and you take that a little bit step further and say, okay, it's really about people. I asked you questions of, well, what are they doing with it? How is that affecting, how do they affect, it's the people that we were trying to get to. Mm-hmm. Because that's what it really means to you.
Yeah.
So I think that a lot of people, when they do art, they're just trying to make something beautiful or really neat looking, or and they don't take it that one step further, where it's not just a knot, it's about people, it's about the relationships and the meaning behind it. So I don't know, I don't think you always need to do that. Yeah. With artwork, but I think with artist books, especially because they are story formatted, they're book formats, it's so much easier to create it if you actually have some more meaning behind it, a story to tell.
I think that I like to start with very basic, concrete things and then let that evolve into something bigger. I did that years ago with my Relics of Our Existence prints that I did way back when, because I was just impressed by how mundane, everyday objects tell such a story to different people. Like, here's a rotary phone. That's a very basic, old-timey kind of thing. But then I'm thinking about visits I had with my grandmother, where I would call my mother on her rotary phone, and then just that memory of dialing on the rotary phone at my grandma's house. That's a meaningful memory to me. But it's just a very basic telephone. And the same thing happened with these knots. I was just looking at a knot, and then I started letting it talk to me. But it didn't come overnight. I was dwelling with these knots for months and just drawing them over and over again until they started telling me a story. So, yeah.
I think everybody approaches it a little bit differently. It's super fun to hear that.
Yeah.
How you take something visually that means something and use that. I go about it in different ways. Mine is more materials. It really is. Like when I pick something up and I feel it, or my kids that would bring me home. My son brought me home a bunch of pine needles one day and said, "Here you go, Mom." And I was like, "Oh, thanks." And but I looked at those and I thought, this was a walk he took, and he picked up a lot of pine needles for me. And I thought, let's make a book out of this. And so when I went to go make a book out of it, there weren't enough pine needles. And so I said, "Can you go on a walk and get me some more?" So my sons went and got some more for me. But it really is like there's something that just kind of sparks it. It's an object, I guess. And for me, it was, I guess maybe that's the same way. For you, it was a rotary phone. For me, it was pine needles, right? Mm-hmm. Something that kind of triggers something in us that says, hey, this might mean something, or this is worthwhile. Yeah. So
I love that pine needle story. I didn't know that about your pine needle book because I saw your pine needle book, obviously, but I didn't know that that's why you made it. And see, now it's even more significant. Yeah. Well, and it really helps to have a Karleigh J. Haywood in your life when you're making art.
Helps to have anybody, right?
Actually, yeah,
Else they do
anybody who is inquisitive and interested in this sort of conversation who can help you explore ideas, like you can find a thinking partner. That is a huge boon. That's helpful when you're creating art, thinking partners. In fact, we have the forums at editions.studio. I feel like if we can get that going, that it's a perfect place to do this kind of thinking partnership is the forums.
I love the thinking partner concept.
Yeah.
That's great.
Well, anyway, thank you, Karleigh.
You're welcome, Sarah, anytime.